In 1998, researchers at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory ran a straightforward test. They applied duct tape to heating ducts, cycled the system through normal temperature changes, and waited. The tape dried out, curled at the edges, and fell off. Every single sample failed. The product named for sealing ducts could not seal ducts. It could, however, still do exactly what it was designed to do in 1943. Waterproof an ammunition crate in a tropical monsoon, patch a torn canvas cover on a supply truck grinding through mud somewhere in the South Pacific, hold together whatever a soldier needed held together in conditions where nothing else would stick. You have a roll of it in a drawer right now. And the story of how it got there starts with a woman in an ordnance plant who was tired of watching paper tape fail. Vesta Stout worked at the Green River Ordnance Plant in Illinois, inspecting and packing ammunition boxes for shipment overseas. The boxes were sealed with thin paper tape and dipped in wax for moisture resistance. Stout watched the tape tear. She watched it peel. She had 2 sons in the Navy, and she understood what a jammed ammunition box could mean on a beach or in a foxhole where seconds separated a functioning weapon from a dead Marine. So she did something almost no one in a wartime factory would think to do. She wrote directly to President Roosevelt. She described the problem. She proposed a solution: a cloth-backed, waterproof adhesive tape that would not fail in rain or humidity or salt spray. Roosevelt's office forwarded the letter to the War Production Board. Johnson & Johnson's Permacell division was already developing adhesive tape technologies, and whether Stout's letter was the catalyst or the confirmation, by late 1943, the product existed. A polyethylene-coated duck cloth tape with a rubber-based adhesive, olive drab to match military equipment, tearable by hand, resistant to water, sticking to wood and metal and canvas and skin. The troops called it duct tape, probably for the cloth backing, possibly for the way water rolled off it. It sealed ammunition crates. It patched Jeep seats. It held bandages in place. It repaired torn tent canvas. It did, in short, whatever you asked it to do, in whatever conditions the Pacific Theater threw at it. After the war, contractors building houses for returning GIs discovered it worked for sealing heating ductwork. Manufacturers started making it silver to match galvanized metal. The name shifted from duct tape to duct tape, and for the next 50 years, everyone assumed that was what it was for. It was not. It never was. The one-job duct tape was named for is the one job science has proven it cannot do. That pattern, a wartime solution designed for a specific military problem, outliving the emergency, migrating into civilian life, and eventually being used for something its creators never imagined, is not an exception. It is the defining story of how your household works. The tape in your drawer, the glue in your cabinet, the appliance on your kitchen counter, the pen on your desk. Each one carries invisible wartime DNA. Each one was supposed to be temporary. Consider what is sitting in your refrigerator right now. If there is a bottle of Fanta, you are holding something whose name traces back to Nazi Germany in 1941, though not in the way most people think. When the United States entered the war, trade embargoes cut the German subsidiary of Coca-Cola off from its parent company in Atlanta. No more syrup shipments. No more recipe. Max Keith, the head of Coca-Cola GmbH, faced a choice: shut down the operation or improvise. Keith was not an ideologue. He was a businessman running an American company's infrastructure inside the Third Reich, and he wanted that infrastructure intact for whenever the war ended. So he told his chemists to make something, anything, from whatever ingredients were available inside wartime Germany. What was available was whey from dairy processing and apple pomace, the fibrous residue left over from cider pressing, plus beet sugar. The result was a cloudy, amber-brown, vaguely sweet beverage that bore no resemblance to any fruit soda you have ever tasted. Keith named it Fanta, derived from the German word fantasy. It sold because Germans in wartime had limited choices, not because it was good. Here is what the popular story usually leaves out. Coca-Cola GmbH operated within the Nazi economic system. At least one of its bottling plants used forced laborers. The parent company in Atlanta maintained distance, claiming Keith acted independently. After the war ended, Keith turned over every pfennig of profit and the entire undamaged operation to Coca-Cola's returning executives. He had kept the lights on. The company rewarded him. And in 1955, Coca-Cola relaunched Fanta globally as a bright orange fruit soda with an entirely new formula. The modern Fanta shares nothing with the wartime product except a name born from desperation and food waste in a country that was running out of both. Now open your kitchen drawer. Find a ballpoint pen. Hold it for a moment. In 1944, at altitude over occupied Europe, RAF bomber crews had a problem that sounds trivial until you understand what it meant. Fountain pens leaked. In the unpressurized cabins of heavy bombers flying at 20,000 feet, the pressure differential forced ink out of fountain pen reservoirs and onto navigation charts, logbooks, and the hands of navigators who needed to plot courses with precision in freezing air and darkness. A smeared chart over the North Sea at night was not an inconvenience. It was a potential death sentence for a crew of 7. Laszlo Biro, a Hungarian journalist and inventor, had patented a pen using a rotating ball bearing to dispense viscous ink in 1938. The RAF ordered 30,000 of them from the Miles Martin Pen Company in 1944. They worked at altitude. They worked in cold. They did not leak. After the war, Milton Reynolds sold the first ballpoint pens at Gimbel's department store in New York on October 29, 1945. The store sold 10,000 pens at $12.50 each on the first day. Within 3 years, competition drove the price under $1. The fountain pen, dominant for a century, was functionally finished, killed by altitude sickness in a bomber over Germany. If you are still holding that pen, consider what else in your house descends from a specific military problem solved under pressure and never meant to last. The aerosol can under your bathroom sink, hairspray, deodorant, shaving cream, descends from a device the Army called the bug bomb. In 1941, Lyle Goodhue and William Sullivan at the U.S. Department of Agriculture developed a pressurized canister to deliver DDT insecticide to soldiers in the Pacific Theater, where malaria killed more men than Japanese fire in some campaigns. A GI in a canvas tent on a tropical island, sweat on his face, mosquitoes in clouds around the netting, pressing the trigger on an olive-painted canister the size of a small fire extinguisher. That is the ancestor of the can of Fibreze on your shelf. Over 40 million aerosol insecticide cans were produced for military use by 1945. 4 years later, Robert Applenalp patented the crimp-on valve that made cheap consumer aerosol cans possible, and the bug bomb became everything from cooking spray to air freshener. Your tires. Look at your car, parked outside or in your garage. Every tire on it is made primarily of synthetic rubber, a material that exists at industrial scale only because of the most expensive emergency science program of the Second World War. A program that cost more than the Manhattan Project and that almost no one remembers. In early 1942, Japan captured Southeast Asia and with it 90% of the world's natural rubber supply. The crisis was existential and immediate. Without rubber, there were no tires for military vehicles, no gaskets for engines, no seals for hydraulic systems, no insulation for electrical wiring. The entire mechanized American military, every tank, every truck, every aircraft, stopped. The Baruch Committee reported to Roosevelt in September 1942 that the rubber shortage threatened the collapse of the war effort. Not a setback, a collapse. The government launched the largest emergency chemical program in history. Synthetic rubber, designated GRS, government rubber styrene, was produced in quantities that scaled from nearly nothing to over 800,000 tons per year by 1945. After the war, the program was privatized. The chemistry improved. And today, approximately 60% of all rubber used on Earth is synthetic, descended directly from that wartime emergency. You drive on it. Your plumbing seals with it. The elastic in your clothing stretches with it. A material that exists only because an island nation on the other side of the world cut off a tree sap supply in 1942. Now consider the appliance you probably used this morning without a second thought. The microwave on your kitchen counter. Percy Spencer never finished grammar school. Orphaned at 18 months, raised by an aunt who died when he was 7, he joined the Navy at 18 to learn wireless telegraphy, the only education in electronics available to a boy with no money and no formal schooling. By the 1940s, he was one of the leading magnetron engineers at Raytheon, self-taught, holder of over 100 patents, and one of the few civilians awarded the Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award for his wartime work on radar systems. In 1945, standing near an active cavity magnetron, a vacuum tube device that generated the microwave radiation powering Allied radar, Spencer noticed that a candy bar near him had melted. The popular version says it was chocolate in his pocket. Other accounts say a peanut cluster bar on a nearby bench. The specific candy does not matter. What matters is what happened next. A lesser engineer might have cursed and cleaned up the mess. Spencer immediately understood what was happening. He sent for popcorn kernels. They popped. He brought in an egg. It exploded. Within days, he had designed a metal box to contain and direct the microwave energy. And Raytheon filed a patent. The word accident gets attached to this story constantly, and it is the wrong word. Spencer did not stumble into a discovery. He recognized a phenomenon because he was, through decades of self-directed study, one of the most qualified people on Earth to recognize it. The accident was the melted candy bar. The invention was deliberate. Raytheon produced the first commercial microwave oven in 1947. The Raider range stood nearly 6 feet tall, weighed 750 pounds, and cost $5,000, roughly $67,000 in today's money. It was sold to restaurants and ship galleys. The countertop home microwave did not arrive until the Amana Raiderange in 1967, over 2 decades later. The $50 appliance on your counter descends from a refrigerator-sized military radar spin-off that was taller than the orphan who invented it. If your family carries an EpiPen, you are carrying another piece of this inheritance. The auto-injector, the spring-loaded mechanism that drives a needle through clothing and into muscle in seconds, was developed for soldiers, not children. The military needed a way for a soldier exposed to nerve gas to self-administer atropine antidote while panicking, possibly contaminated, possibly unable to see. The mechanism had to work through a uniform sleeve. It had to fire in seconds. In 1977, Sheldon Kaplan adapted that military auto-injector for civilian epinephrine delivery, a device designed to let a nerve agent-exposed soldier save his own life in combat now lets a parent save a child from a peanut allergy in a school cafeteria. Did your grandfather serve? Your grandmother work in one of those converted factories? If someone in your family lived through this war, on any side, in any capacity, I want to hear about it. Tell us in the comments who they were and where they served. These stories disappear when no one writes them down. There is a thread running through every one of these objects. Not genius, not accident, constraint. The defining condition of wartime engineering was that materials were rationed, labor was scarce, time was non-existent, and the solution had to work immediately in field conditions operated by an 18-year-old who had been a grocery clerk 6 months earlier. No time for elegance, no budget for perfection. Just, does it work? Does it work now? Does it work wet, cold, muddy, dropped, and abused? The designs that survived those constraints turned out to be almost indestructible in civilian life, where conditions are gentler than any battlefield. The Jeep, designed to last 3 years and be discarded, created the SUV. Willys Overland was already planning civilian models before the surrender was signed. Over 640,000 Jeeps were built during the war, a vehicle given 49 days from military request to working prototype, a vehicle meant to be disposable, a vehicle whose combination of four-wheel drive, high clearance, and brutal simplicity had no civilian equivalent. The CJ2A rolled off the line in 1945. 80 years later, its descendants dominate global roads. Superglue sat on a shelf for 13 years. Harry Coover discovered cyanoacrylate at Eastman Kodak in 1942 while trying to make optically clear plastic for gun sights. The substance was useless for optics. It bonded to everything it touched. Coover discarded it. In 1951, working on a different project, he encountered the compound again and this time recognized what he had. Eastman 910 launched in 1958. During Vietnam, military medics used cyanoacrylate to seal wounds in the field, circling back to military use decades after the original military context. The FDA did not approve medical-grade cyanoacrylate until 1998. The worst possible result in a gun sight laboratory became the most useful adhesive in the world. 13 years after the man who discovered it threw it away. Even the act of computing, the device in your pocket, the screen you may be watching this on, traces its lineage to wartime machines built for two specific military purposes. Colossus, operational at Bletchley Park in 1944, was built to break German Lorenz cipher traffic. ENIAC, commissioned by the U.S. Army in 1945, calculated artillery firing tables. Neither was conceived as a general-purpose device. Neither was imagined as something a civilian would use. The concept that computation could be universal was a post-war realization. Every digital device on Earth descends from machines built to break codes and aim weapons. And every commercial flight you have ever taken used pressurization technology refined inside B-29 Superfortress bombers over Japan. The B-29 was the first mass-produced aircraft with a pressurized cabin, allowing crews to operate at high altitude for hours without individual oxygen masks. That engineering, sealing, pressure differential management, outflow valves transferred directly to post-war commercial aviation. Without it, passenger flights above 10,000 feet would require oxygen masks for every traveler. Modern air travel as you know it would not exist. You live inside this war's engineering every day. You seal with it. You glue with it. You heat your coffee with it. You spray with it. You drive on it. You fly inside it. You compute with it. You write with it. The objects feel ordinary because you have never known a world without them. But the people who made them expected them to last 3 years, 5 years, until the fighting stopped and the factories converted back to peacetime production. The fighting stopped. The factories converted. The inventions did not go away. They could not. They were too simple, too robust, too perfectly shaped by the constraints of total war to be replaced by anything more elegant. Elegance is a luxury of peacetime. These objects were forged in the opposite of luxury, and they turned out to be, in their blunt and accidental way, permanent. The next time you tear off a strip of duct tape, remember that it was olive drab once. That a woman named Vesta Stout, with 2 sons somewhere in the Pacific, looked at a failing paper seal on an ammunition box and decided the problem was worth a letter to the President of the United States. She was right. The tape held. It is still holding. If this is the kind of history that matters to you, the kind that lives in your kitchen drawer and your medicine cabinet and the tires under your car, stay with this channel. There is more to find. The war ended 80 years ago. What it built is still in your hands.